Another 5 or 7 minutes for that to get.
Oh.
All right, welcome everybody. Let's call the meeting to order and we'll say our pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming.
Let's see. Oh. Roll call. I have Andy's here. Right?
Here,
Okay.
Andy Mark,
Cindy,
here,
our new member, Cindy
all time.
Altide, present. And Kevin
Tui here.
present. Judy
Hello.
and Joe David Louise. We are all here. The whole gang, the whole crew. We're all here. Welcome, Cindy, for your
Thank
first meeting. Thank you
Yes.
for joining us. And are there any additions to the agenda? Then, any interested citizens? Audience requesting comments? I don't have.
Here, if we could just approve the
Move
agenda.
to-
Make a motion that we
No.
approve the agenda as is.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved, approved. Okay, and then are there any interested citizens online? Because there's none in person. I don't see any. Okay. All right, anyone wants to make a motion for approval of the minutes from November 20th? As is?
I'll move to approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We want to roll back to,
There's another opportunity at the end of the.
Yeah. Okay. All right, then I need to, now the proper time to acknowledge
Yes, you acknowledge this during the interest citizens, so
during the
we
what?
go ahead and do it.
Okay, I want to acknowledge that we have receipt of a record from citizens' comments from Tammy Roberson. And then a letter from Winston and Cashaw lawyers. Okay. And now we'll move to staff reports.
You seem to be in the dark. Is there
Are we
that
missing
light
them?
switch right there?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was light.
Okay. Well, first, I want to welcome Cindy Altai. I'm so excited to have a new member. And I want to say a preemptive goodbye to Judy. This is her last meeting. And we had applications open through today, so the mayor will be choosing a new commissioner soon. So thank you so much, Judy, for 12 years of service.
11, right?
11 years of service. So thank you so much and sticking with it, even in this last meeting that had a big staff report you had to read through. So thank you.
Most of the time it was my pleasure.
Yeah. We had our Facebook Live event last week, and I don't know how many of you were able to tune in at the time or possibly later view it on YouTube. We had a little snafu with technology, and we ended up having to actually broadcast it on YouTube instead of Facebook. I won't bother explaining the logistics of that, but that's the way it turned out. So we've had 80 some people view it since it was posted on YouTube. So that's great. No comments. But if you were able to view it or be there when it was live, I'd love to hear any feedback about that event. And I know Mr. Tui posted a couple questions, which I went back to grab in order to answer on Facebook, and they're not there. So the questions that were posted during.
He posted it on a previous post advertising for the event,
Okay.
not on the event itself.
Okay, so I wanted to address your questions, but I couldn't find them when I went to do it. So I
We
can.
could do it offline.
So-
Yeah, I'm happy to address those questions, when you remind me what they are, so. But did anybody have any comments about the event itself?
I went to listen to it later because I had a class that night, so I couldn't watch live in that. I was disappointed in how many people did not come online and at least listen, how many of the town in that, and I wonder why. So I looked back at the advertisement, and to me, it looked like it was going to be just conversations between people online about the town, not so much what it turned out to be, the comp plan and all that. So I'm wondering if that had anything to do with people saying, well, I don't want to just get online and talk. And two people that I spoke to said that that was what they thought when they saw,
So they thought they would need to speak if they tuned in? Is that-
well, and to speak and listen, and it was just going to be community members telling stories about living in Medical Lake,
Uh,
is what the people that I talked to, and that was what I first thought when I saw the advertisement. And that's, I wonder if we could have either worded it differently or said somewhere on that advertisement what you were gonna actually talk about
mhm.
and that. And so I was, like I said, I was just disappointed in the very tiny community involvement in that, when it could have and should have been pretty big, you know? So-
Yeah, well, that's good feedback. I'll have to go back and see how we advertise what we said to figure out how we can do it better. Good feedback, though.
It was very interesting information and good information. And even on my screen too, it was mostly looking at what you said, the slide there and that, but in the very top corner, about 2 inches by 1 inch, was the speakers. So I could see them sort of.
Yeah, so Judy and I had a conversation earlier this week, and I was explaining what I saw was not the same as what the viewers saw. So I did not realize at the time that it would mostly be a slide, right? So what I was seeing was a panel of speakers and a slide. So that is also, it was good feedback also that
That would have been much
it
more
was-
interesting.
It
Yeah.
would be more interesting to see the person
Right.
rather than a postage stamp of the person and mostly the slide. Yeah, I agree. Any other comments? Okay. I don't have anything else to report, and if there's any questions you have of me, I would be happy to answer for any subjects. No? Okay.
Did you want to go ahead and just move into scheduled items or periodic update?
How to see which one's that? Street vacations. I don't think I brought the chart with me, but you have the 11 by 17 table of all the things we're going through. So street vacations is our fourth column on the on the chart, and so we're just starting that. The street vacation is one, like the code enforcement, that a public hearing will not be held here in the planning commission. It will be only held at city council. But I want to keep you in the loop and get good feedback from you. So that's why I'm presenting on the street vacations. And I'll just describe one more time. The reason it is and isn't is because the planning commission acts under the Growth Management Act, and street vacations fall under another part of our CWs for the state. And that's how things kind of get divided up, and when you do or you do not have a hearing to make a recommendation to the council. So for tonight, the first thing I want to address is, what is a street vacation? Because it is a weird term. And if you type it into Google, you'll get pictures of people standing in the street around the world having a great vacation. But what it actually is a formal legal process by which the city, county, or town relinquishes its public interest in a street, alley, or road, also known as a right-of-way. And I'll explain the difference in street and right-of-way on the next slide. So the reason a right of way exists is it's a way of public travel, right? So all right of ways, the primary purpose is public travel, secondarily utilities, right? So that's why we have all the above ground and underground utilities generally located in rights of way. So when a vacation happens, the government is terminating its easement for public travel. So effectively closing the street or alley from public use. Typically, we do retain easements for utilities, not always. So I use the term right of way and I use the term street, and a street is in a right of way. So the right of way is the entire area of the public right of way, and that's versus a private property or right. So it could be technically owned by a public entity, but private property versus the public right of way. So in this city, we have lots of right of ways that are 80 feet wide. This is a picture of Stanley. I don't actually know if Stanley is 80 feet wide, but you can see the right of way is the public area much larger than the street, which is just the paved area. So when you talk about the street, it's referring to all the improvements, right? So to make it further complicated, the roadway is the pavement you drive on. The street includes the sidewalks. The right of way is everything. Yeah. And then an alley, in this instance, I just wanted to point out, it is an alley. I don't know if we have any alleys that are paved, and generally alleys, we don't get so technical. The alley is just that space that's publicly owned behind residences, and whether or not it's paved or not paved or has any kind of improvements, and oftentimes it has utilities. We definitely have them in the city. So a street vacation, I tried to create a diagram since Google was no help, only giving me pictures of people on vacation. So on the left, you have what exists via a plat, right? So when a subdivision happens, the streets and the lots are platted, and you end up with private lots and public right of way. And so you have lots 1 through 6, private lots, you have the right of way in between. And then after a street vacation, that right of way goes away, and the right of way is split between the owners, right? So this standard procedure, and there are exceptions, but standard procedure is the right of way is split and it goes to either side, the private property on either side. Because you're planning commission, I'll also say that zones don't apply to right of way, and so when a right of way is vacated, the zone of the adjacent property is given to the new land that it has been, the land that's now private and then on the public. Next slide. So I could not find any good examples of what I just described, so I'm showing you an example of something that I'm not sure when it happened, but it doesn't seem to be split on either side. And the only guess I can make is because the same person owned all of these. But on the right side is a county map that shows, is a little bit confusing because all the red are originally platted lots that still exist below the tax lot. So the blue lines are the tax lots. And the streets used to be a grid here, but the grid has sort of disappeared. It's the same picture on the left. You can see that in reality, it's a couple of residences, the buildings associated with those residences, and then mostly undeveloped land, no streets, no pavement anywhere there, and some wetlands. So if you could do one click, it'll bring up or a arrow. There we go. So it used to be a grid, but now this is the public right of way in this area. So we still have public right of way that was platted 100 years ago, maybe a little more actually. They did not have critical areas ordinance back then, and they did not pay any attention to those wetlands. And so that's why we ended up with that grid. And so you can see some of the grid has disappeared. It's been vacated. into private land, and some of the grid is still there for better or for worse, through the wetlands and potentially has utilities. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of these have utilities in them, even though they're not paved streets. So here's another example of things that we should vacate. And on the left is our zoning map. And the greenish areas are the schools. And so Hallett, which is in the bottom left, you can see is a single parcel that houses Hallett. But on the top, the north, is the high school, which has one larger property that houses mostly the track is up there. But then it still shows all these streets that are covered with buildings, and the same for the middle school, which is the one on the lower right. The middle school sits there, but you could not tell by looking at this where it is because all those streets still appear. So then the diagram on the right that's gray, it shows the lots, and in light gray there it shows the building. If you could do the next slide, it should pop up there. So that is our middle school. So it's sitting in public right of way. Why these streets were never vacated, I don't know. So something that we hope to address in the future is working with the school district to vacate these right of ways, really just cleaning up our maps. We don't get taxes from the city, or excuse me, from the schools. So in other instances, we might have private entities where we're actually missing out on property taxes because it's sitting on private right of way. I don't expect a lot of those, but it is possible that exists.
Lisa, so to address this, the school district would have to initiate a request to vacate the streets. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It is. So our current code does not address street vacations at all. I've been here 3 years and I have processed one street vacation, and we use the process that is spelled out in the RCWs 35.79. And on the next slide. So vacation of streets. It has to be initiated by a petition of the adjacent owners, 2/3. So yes, in the instance of the schools, it's likely it would only be the school that would initiate. They would be 2/3, in fact. So once the petition comes in, it's given to city council, and the city council must set a hearing date via resolution. And so there'll be the initial discussion at city council, and they'll set the hearing date, they'll pass the resolution, and then a public notice will be put in the newspaper and on the site. And if we stayed in line with the rest of applications we have, we would put it, or we would also mail it to the adjacent property owners or owners within 300 feet. But the RCWs don't actually say we have to do that. We just have to put it in the newspaper and on site. Then the public hearing is held, and the council makes the final decision. It does not come through planning commission. It is just the city council decision. And the RCWs say the city can require compensation. Up to this point, I said in the briefing sheet, we've had at least 30, and to my knowledge, we have never received any compensation for all of the land that we have given away to private property owners. And then the city can reserve easements for utilities also. So that's what the RCW says. So why have our own process and requirements in our code? Because of what's missing from our state law. So we would benefit from policy regarding best practices for the city, criteria in how to evaluate that request, policies regarding easements, and policy regarding compensation. And then as a final note, this is also part of the RCWs, and since we have a lake, it's very important that we as a city cannot vacate a street or alley abutting water unless it's for the city. So we cannot vacate right of way to give to a private party. It has to be for the city, and it has to be for something related to the water. So this is the list. Probably not port development for us, but beach or water access, boat moorage, launching sites, park recreation, public viewing, education, etc. But it has to be water oriented. I'm not sure that's the right word, but it has to have to do with the water. Like we can't vacate right away and build a school, right? It has to be very specific to accessing the water and providing the public access to that water. Have we ever vacated any right of way adjacent to our lake? I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to do a little research, but we do have many streets that dead end in the lake. So, any questions? The next step in this process will be essentially the same presentation as City Council. And then after that, we'll be working on language for an ordinance.
So if the schools have to initiate it for their areas, have they been asked or contacted or requested to look into doing this?
I believe I have mentioned it in passing to the superintendent, but we haven't, since we don't even have a process in our code, we haven't had any discussions about it in any detail.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, you can always contact me later with questions. Or concerns.
Is it a time consuming process for you when somebody requests a street vacation?
Not
Or do
terribly.
they provide all of the material?
So they have to provide a survey. And then I handle the process internally and providing all the information to the council. So that amount of time, and because we don't have anything that requires the potential owners to do it, we also handle all the notifications in the paper and on site. I am also the person that reviews the survey to make sure that it's accurate, or the pieces are accurate, like what's happening on the survey. And then I contact utilities, like so Avista, of course, our own Public Works, whoever might have utilities, because if there's utilities there, we definitely want to know that. And so we can retain that easement. So it's not terribly time consuming, but it's not a matter of just receiving an application and handing it off to City Council.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, if I clarify a thing too, just so post-process, there's reporting to the county as well, so that apps start to show up, and historically, that's been an issue for the city looking back, because that part of the process sometimes hasn't happened.
That's correct. So, yeah, after the city approves it, then I provide all the information to the applicant and they take it to the county for recording. And so they adjust all their maps and tax parcels and everything. And it did come to light a few months ago that we've had vacations approved by City Council that are not showing up on scout maps. So I haven't gone further than that to know if it was an error on the city's part, an error on the applicant's part, an error on the county's part. Like I don't know where the disconnect is that, but there's definitely more than one. So I have to go back and look at all of them to try to fix that at some point.
All right, so now we're gonna move into our public hearing. I'm now opening the public hearing periodic update for Medical Lake Municipal Code amendments regarding amendment criteria, and I believe our start time will be 5:55. This hearing will be conducted as follows. The city planner will make a presentation. Then all those citizens wishing to speak will get a turn. After citizens' comments, the city planner will also answer questions of the planning commission. So, hand it over to Lisa for the presentation.
You should really hire more planners just to get diversity.
Maybe a voice modulating. Sure.
Yeah, if I was a voice actor, I could totally improve on this experience. So I will remind you first, why are we doing this? We want a clear, well-organized, enforceable municipal code that adheres to state law while reflecting our community values. The topic tonight is amendment criteria. And it's a little confusing because we are using our existing criteria for amending to evaluate future criteria for amending. So it's a little bit tricky. And I apologize if anything gets confusing and I've lost track of what I'm trying to say. Please interrupt me because it's a little odd. Hopefully this is the only time we will ever have to deal with amending the criteria we use to amend criteria. Next slide, please. So legislative review, the city made a SEPA determination. So in this instance, we are the applicant. I filled out the SEPA checklist. We make the SEPA determination. We made a determination of non-significance, meaning we don't expect an environmental impact of any significance from the outcome of this decision. A public notice was posted in the newspaper, and it was posted on our website. Because it's not site specific, our residents do not receive anything in the mail. Tonight we're having the public hearing and you'll be making the recommendation. The next step is city council with the language workshop. So they'll see the same language that you see tonight, have the opportunity for any input before it gets put in ordinance form. So that's the next step is the first read of an ordinance that comes with a public hearing. So because it's legislative, city council will also do a public hearing. And then they cannot vote on or vote to approve or deny the ordinance until a second read is done. And the city typically does those at 2 different city council meetings. So there'll be a final meeting. And in any point between these, the language can be adjusted. This particular one, I'm not necessarily expecting, but as we go on with all of our other amendments that we're looking at, it's likely that we'll see changes between all these meetings. So this proposal is to replace in Title 17, Chapter 17.42, which is titled Amendments, that talks about amendments of any type, comp plan, zoning map, or development regulations. And when I say development regulations, I'm talking about the municipal code, generally titles 15 through 19. This is also replacing section 17.12.030, the official zoning code, and section 17.12.040. Sorry, I'm looking at that thinking zoning code and wondering if it should say zoning map. So 17.12.040 interpretation of district boundaries. So the reason that all of chapter 17.12 is not being replaced is because we are in a process of moving parts of our code. So it's going to exist in 2 titles for a little while. So right now it's getting replaced with items in Title 19. So instead of 2 different chapters, we're having 3 different chapters to make the distinction among the 3. So we have the comprehensive plan, the zoning map administration, and amendments to the development code, titles 15 through 19. So that's why we're replacing instead of just amending language as is. Next slide. So as I was trying to describe, right now we have 15 through 18. These are all development regulations that I'm responsible for as a planner under the Growth Management Act. And we want to bring all those into Title 19, and eventually 15 through 18 would disappear. but it's a lot of information, and the idea of trying to do it all at once would be difficult for staff. It would be difficult for yourselves and the council to really digest what we were proposing. So this is why we're doing everything in steps. But that is why it's always, or lots of times it's moving to 19th. Next slide. So the proposal, which you have all the language in the staff report, I'm not going to read through anything. I'm just going to go over the headings. So every one has a purpose and applicability. And then for comprehensive plan, it talks about the 10-year update and the annual update, which we discussed last time. And then applications, and applications are when private parties want to apply for an amendment. The city doesn't make an application. We do initiate, but we don't have to fill out an application and provide the things listed as an application. It spells out the process, which we're going through tonight, and those approval criteria, which we discussed last time. For zoning map administration, similar, starts with purpose and applicability. It also talks about the urban growth area, because in our comprehensive plan, we have to designate future zones for urban growth areas, even though they are zoned in the county as is. Maintenance, which talks about when we update the map, how we do it and where it is held and who signs it and how it's dated and all the, the simple but very important things about maintaining our zoning map. A couple of you were here, but most of you weren't. So a couple of years ago, well, really when I started working here, so I started working here. There was no planner before me. The city administrator had functioned as a planner and hired consultants where necessary. And so when I asked where the zoning map was, I was handed a foam core board with a zoning map that turned out, after some research, was created in the 90s and had like people had drawn things over time, but it was obvious by information I had that it was not 100% accurate. So then I went through looking for the official zoning map, and I could never find a zoning map that reflected all the zone changes that I knew had happened based on files I had come across or minutes from meetings or whatever. So we basically reestablished the official zoning map based on the research that I did. So that's what we have behind me, is that. So maintenance, very important. Dated, ordinance number, where's it kept? Very important. Boundaries, it talks about, I mentioned earlier, streets and lakes are not zoned, so the boundaries are just private property. And nice practice is to keep zones in line with property lines, right? But what can happen is, like, a property line can move after a zone is placed, or sometimes it's appropriate to have a site that's split zoned for whatever reason. I won't try to give an example of that one. It does happen occasionally. The zoning districts, which are the zones. So right now we have about 9 or 10 zones. These may change through the process because one of our amendment topics is zoning. So we might see some changes to the zones, and then it would get reflected here. Interpretation. So that is just a statement. Like, if something on the map is not clear, then it is the job of the planning official to figure out what it's supposed to be by looking back at information, potentially ordinances, minutes, like any conversation that took place, to help figure out like where that line was supposed to be. If, for instance, it's not on a property line anymore, trying to figure that out. And we did have that instance when we were recreating our official zoning map. There was a piece of property north of 902 that it was split zoned on some of the maps. Some of it had half commercial, or not exactly half, but lower part commercial, upper part residential. Except where's the line go? Like, I couldn't find no information on that at all. Not just about where the line was, but I just could not figure out how that ever came about. So we removed it. we made it all one zone in the end because we just could not figure out how half of it became residential. Or if it ever did, or if it was just somebody who had fun with a marker. I'm sorry, could you go back? And then amendments. So when it comes to applications, once again, that is something that we will see is individuals or entities wanting to change zones, because as I mentioned last time, as soon as you tell somebody they can't do what they want to do, they ask if they can do a zone change. So we will see those in the future. And it spells out the process and the approval criteria. And then amendments, I dislike the short title, it's confusing. But it has to do with the fact that we're moving everything around. So originally I had said amendments to this title to make it clear, except it's not really just to that title because actually titles 15 through 19 and everything got confusing. So we shortened it to just amendments. But it is amendments to the development regulations as the purpose, the applicability, applications process, and approval criteria. So those basic things needed to deal with amendments to our municipal code. So tonight, I gave you a lengthy staff report. That includes the current criteria. So starting on the lower half, oh no, I'm on the wrong page, let me try again. Lower half of page 20, it says zoning code approval criteria. So these criteria 1 through 11, these are the criteria we have in our code right now, chapter 17.42, how we evaluate any amendments. And that's how we're evaluating the new criteria. So you've had the opportunity to read through that. I am not going to redo that, but I will summarize by saying that the proposed amendments are consistent, certainly not inconsistent, with the comprehensive plan, countywide planning policies, and the Growth Management Act. And the proposal does not adversely affect land uses, critical areas, or services within the city. So I can read through all those criteria, but that's kind of the bones of it is it consistent and nothing is being adversely affected. If you have any questions about the staff report, I'm happy to answer. I just don't want to bore you with reading through all these details. So the possible actions you have tonight, after the hearing is closed, is to recommend approval to the city council as it is written, both the language and the staff report. And the second option is to recommend approval of the proposal with modification. So if there's anything you'd like to change, whether it be language for the proposed language or the findings, or any, not like a typo per se, but like if there's something in the staff report that needs to be changed because of inaccuracy or lack of clarity, then you would make a motion to make those changes and then would vote on recommending that to the city council. And then the third option is if you really do not feel like your questions have been answered and you need more information, you can request staff to address your concerns and return with modified language. So that's my presentation. But as Mr. Belize had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting tonight, we received some comments. And I wanted, since neither of those parties are here, I did want to try to speak to them. You should have received copies. I don't know if you had time to look through them. But the first, Tammy Roberson, she has 8 points. So I just want to go through and try to answer some of them. Some are are good questions. Some of them are more something that you as a planning commission need to make a determination yourself. The first question is, why are no applications accepted for annual updates during the year of that the periodic update is due? And the answer to that question is the periodic update process is 2 years long. So last year was, or excuse me, I guess we're in 25. Sorry. So 2025, like if somebody wanted to submit a request to amend something in our comprehensive plan, you do it in 2025. The reason we don't accept amendment requests in 2026 is we're deep into the process and we cannot really consider new requests at that point. Now we're still going through the process and comments can be made and adjustments can be made. Like the public has access to the process. They can still make all the same requests, not just through an official application, because it just can't take in and fully process an application when we're already in the middle of the process, which happens to be 2 years for every 10 years. Her second question, why are wetlands not stated along with public right-of-ways and lakes? So she is citing, there's a little typo, it's 19140020. She had a 9, just a typo. And it's referring to the zoning map and that public right-of-way and lakes are not zoned. She asked about wetlands. So wetlands are just part of private property. They are not mapped separately. When you look, say at Scout at the tax map, you can see right-of-way. You can't click on a right-of-way. You can't click on a lake because it's not a tax parcel, and that's why it's not zoned. But a wetland is just part of a property and therefore is zoned just like everything else. Number 3, she questions whether the planning official is the correct person to interpret the zoning map. And I believe so. So she suggests a surveyor, and a zoning map is not a land survey. A zoning map is created in-house by the city via GIS. It is not something that is mapped out on the ground. It is just taking the county tax parcels and applying the zoning to it. So when you talk about interpretation, it's as I mentioned earlier, like a property line has moved or something about the map has changed, and now like the properties and property lines and the zoning map don't seem to mesh quite right, and the research needs to be done to figure out what is the correct, where should the line be, what is the correct line. So yes, I do think it's the purview of the planning official, which happens to me at this time, because that is my job, figuring out what's going on in the zoning map and the history of these things. Number 4, she asked where the critical area ordinance fits into hierarchy, because the shoreline master plan is mentioned as being something that amendments need to be consistent with. So we do refer to the critical areas ordinance as a thing on its own. However, it's actually chapter 17.10 in our municipal code. So it gets adopted as an ordinance. We, the city, refer to it as a critical areas ordinance. The state will refer to it as a critical areas ordinance, but in reality is part of our municipal code. So when we talk about development regulations, it falls into that category. So it's not being left out, it's just in a larger umbrella. Number 5, I wasn't completely clear about her statement / question. So if any of you have thoughts on that, I would like to hear it. But she is asking how do we know there's no inconsistencies, or how do we know the current code is written poorly and difficult to implement? I'm not quite sure. She says by whose standards, and I'm not sure what part of that sentence she's speaking to. So I will just say, when we're talking about code that is written poorly and difficult to implement, basically my many years of administering code lets me be the local expert on whether it's easy to implement, because I've had so many years' experience trying to administer code, for better or for worse. And then I'll let you look at the inconsistency statement and come to a conclusion on that. Number 6. So the statement in the finding says that the amendment criteria that the proposal is to replace was adopted in 1999 and never revisited. And so that is in our municipal codes. Chapter 17.42, I think, those are the amendments adopted in 1999. They have never been amended. And she stated that our comprehensive plan was updated in 2019, and that is correct, but it did not affect the amendment criteria of chapter 17.42. Number 7, I think when I mentioned earlier how confusing it is that we are evaluating new criteria based on the old criteria, I think the statement and or question she has is a little bit based on that difficulty of separating those two things. So when you read through that, you can make your own sense of it, but I think that's what's happening, where the confusion lies, is that we're not looking at a proposal, we're evaluating new criteria using the old criteria. And then number 8, I'm just gonna let you consider that statement on your own, rather than try to answer that. I feel it's subjective. The other comments we received, Elizabeth Tellison, it represents Solo Chini LLC, and they were the applicant for our Ring Lake Estates. And I'm just letting you know that to give you background on their interest in these amendments. Reading through this, I think there may be a little bit of confusion on what is being proposed at this time. I get the feeling from a couple of statements that she may think this is at development. Like these are amendments to the zoning map. Okay, so no development is being proposed. These amendments are at zoning map level. So zoning map level is just like the possibility of development. Whereas when you come in for a subdivision, that's on the ground, that's the development happening. And there's just a couple of things she says that I think there might be a little confusion. She didn't submit these until after 4 o'clock today. I haven't had any contact with her for clarification. But for instance, she says, is the regulation clear and easy to apply at the permit level? Well, nothing we're doing is at permit level, so I'm not totally clear. I think there's a little bit of confusion in that. But if you have any questions about this, we also, our legal counsel has read through it and can also speak to it if you have any concerns.
Yeah, a couple comments, but am I out of order? Are we supposed to be doing public comments first?
Yes.
Okay, I'll wait.
Were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we move into citizen comments, I have a few things to read. The following rules are intended to promote an orderly system of holding a public hearing, to give every person an opportunity to be heard, and to ensure that no individual is embarrassed by exercising his or her right of free speech. All comments by members of the public shall be made from the podium, except for those that are online on Zoom. Any individuals making comments shall first give their name and state if they are a resident of Medical Lake. No comments shall be made from any other location Anyone making out of order comments shall be subject to removal from the meeting. There will be no demonstrations during or at the conclusion of anyone's presentation. And each person will have 5 minutes to speak. At the end of the 5 minutes, the speaker must join the audience and allow for the next speaker to have their. Do we have any citizens that want to come forward and have comments? Do we have anybody signed up?
I don't think anybody's signed up.
Okay.
No.
No. Did you have any? No.
I don't think I have.
I believe there's nobody online, is that correct? Okay. So.
Thanks, Katie. Now I know that's what my job.
So
Is that the thing?
now I turn it back to Elisa, city planner, to come to the podium for answering any questions. Anybody has any questions from the planning commission?
Joe David, I have a question. When Snicker Shea letter talks about being cost effective, who else could determine what was cost effective for the city other than the city?
Yes, so I'll just say that one, approval criteria are purposely subjective. If they were objective, it would just be a permit that staff would handle. So it is intended to be subjective. And then, yes, cost effective is something that we do provide many of the services. We don't provide all of the services. So potentially could be another service provider. But as I stated in a previous presentation, if there's any ambiguity about how to apply criteria, this is the time that if we need to reword, it is a good time to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to add on to that, the notion of the cost effectiveness in the context of amendment criteria to the code or the zoning map. And there's so many variables that could be considered based on the specificity of a request to change the zoning map. If we tried to map that out and be as definitive as we could with all of the different hypothetical situations, we could double the size of our code. So I think the goal with the proposed language here is simply saying that we need to consider the cost-effective nature of any requested change. And that should be our amendment criteria to consider the cost-effective measure of any proposed change to the zoning map. And the specific request can address in the conversation as you weigh the criteria for that amendment. The specific request can address the specific cost-effective variables at play. So I just wanted to provide that context in this specific nature. So, because the letter is calling out the zoning map changes, I think Elisa did a great job of explaining that zoning and use are two totally separate things. We're just talking about the zoning and the future use. And so considering the cost-effective nature of some specific request in the future, it seems like a meaningful criteria to use in amending that zoning map. But it is impossible at this stage to define what specifically would be considered in that without a specific request to balance against the criteria.
Can I assume that one of you will be responding to Ms. Tellison?
Yes.
I mean, I think your explanation was right on. I mean, this is the aim is wrong with this letter. It's not aiming at what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, for sure. And there was a request that if it's all right, there was a request in this letter for a continuance of the hearing tonight, the planning commission, and I think it'd be great to hear from legal counsel the purview they have there.
Sure, and this meeting has been properly noted, as it was laid out at the beginning of our presentation. Provided notice on the website, provided notice in paper, All of those requirements are met. This meeting was well known. The deadlines associated were well known and published. The request for a continuance is contained in a document submitted 2 hours or over 2 hours beyond today's 2 p.m. deadline. So I would just say that any request for a continuance contained in the untimely document that's submitted an hour before a hearing, or maybe an hour and a half before a hearing that's been properly noted previously, is not an adequate basis to continue hearing. And I will also just clarify, this is not a project specific hearing that we are here on tonight. This is proposed language to the municipal code that you guys are deciding to make a recommendation to city council on. It's not in relation to any specific project or anything like that. So I would just say that the request for continuance is untimely and should not be considered based on my legal analysis, based on my review.
Do we need to take any action to deny a continuance, or do we just simply not hear it?
So you can simply not hear it's an untimely request that really isn't properly noted before asking.
Thank you.
Anything else, Kevin? Question?
No, I think we've addressed it very well tonight. Thank you, Lisa.
Cindy? Any question?
No, I appreciate the explanations. It's helpful.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Judy?
Oh, good.
All right. Okay.
Actually have one, I realized I hadn't said something about Miss Robertson's number 7 that I had intended to say, and I just, for the record, because likely she'll be able to listen to this later. I had told you to read through it and make your own conclusions, but I did want to say the criteria where it talks about affect the available supply of forecasted land. So I might have given an example at a previous presentation about changing zoning. Like if we are trying to accommodate a certain population with a certain number of households, and in that calculation are multifamily units, and we change the zoning to a single family zone, which inherently brings down the number of units, then we're potentially running against our mandates by the state to provide housing for a certain number of people. So this is not explicitly what she's asking, but it's kind of overlapping when she talks about the UDA and the zoning and the wetlands. And so I just want to explain, when that criteria was written, that is mainly what is behind that criteria, is we have a mandate regarding population and housing. And we need to make sure we're adhering to that, even though we are considering a zone map amendment in the future.
Is that it, Lisa?
Yes.
Thank you. So this now concludes, and we're closing the hearing at 6:29. Okay. And next thing is for us to deliberate. We don't have any other questions amongst ourselves. Kevin, Judy, Cindy. Okay, so then we will we have 3 options proposed to us tonight for our possible action. One is to recommend, option 1 is to recommend approval of the proposal as is. Option 2 is to recommend approval to the proposal with modifications. And then the third option was request staff to address concerns and return with modified language. So I will ask if anybody has a motion for one of the proposals.
Good.
I'd recommend approval of the proposal as is.
Oops, say it again.
Recommend approval of the proposal as is.
I'll second that.
Second that. Any discussion? No, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous, so we will recommend to the city council to approve the proposal as is.
And the amendments.
With amendments. Okay. Get back to my. So our next thing is public hearing.
Just
Oh,
finish that.
I'm sorry.
You just finished.
Oh, we did finish. I'm sorry. That was number 7.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Commission members' comments and or concerns. So we're gonna do Andy, Cindy, Kevin, Judy. No comments. Annie, did you say no?
I just want to thank Judy again.
Thank you.
Here. Yes.
I said most of the time it was my pleasure.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to do, that we say thank you, Judy. A long tenure on what is obviously going to turn out to be a lot of work. Commission.
I'm kind of glad that I'm walking at the time that I'm walking. I've been through this twice, like I said, I had trouble even going through the packet, forcing myself, read this, you gotta read this, you got one more meeting, you know.
It's always good to end on a high note. Appreciate all that you've done in the short
be
life of you. So
Yeah, I'll be back.
we're so grateful. City's grateful, the commission's grateful.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's,
And your commitment.
thanks, it's been a positive experience, and I've learned so much about local politics and a whole bit, I'm like, wow, had not a clue. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next to last is if there's any interested citizens that have any comments at this time? Yeah, we don't have anybody online. So, okay. This will conclude our meeting tonight at 6:32.
I'll make a motion, we all go home.
I'll
Be
second the
safe.
motion.
And you for the last time.
Right.
Be safe out there.
Discussion.
Oh, any discussion? We're good? Okay. All right, we are
In favor?
adjourned. Huh?
All in favor?
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Aye. You guys over
We
there.
don't have to vote on that. Okay. All right. Favor?
Aye.
We are now closed. 6:33.